in my opinion, part of the psychology that we suffer from as a community is that we acquiesce to white supremacy. Our ancestors devised strategies to obtain power in the society, wherever they were. They strove for political power. And they began to attack them. They began to attack the outspoken males, the outspoken females, lynching them, burning their houses, burning their churches. And it never really stopped, but it only flares up when there's political consciousness or movements that attempt to gain the support of the masses of our people. You know, little pockets, you're not a threat. But when you try to gain the masses of the people, you become a threat to their economics. And that's what we're dealing with, because this is still a market. Okay? So now, you want to say something?
No, I'm listening to you.
So when we look at this political structure, right? And they started that take our country back, right? Only because they saw a black guy as the leader, right? Then they stepped up attacks on black people. They stepped up rhetoric about race wars. Everybody's talking about the race wars imminent. That's because the black guy was the leader, okay, of a white supremacist based fabricated reality, because America's a fabrication. Okay, so when you see the reality of it, like these people who claim that we were always here, miss the point of the reality of America. America wasn't always here. America got a birth date. So what we dealing with is the birth date of this thing, because from then it became an entity in and unto itself. And everything that comes into reality strives to maintain that reality. It strives to live. The different components of it only serve to enhance its longevity. So life is like that. This is why things fight to live. This is why chickens don't just lay down and give you their legs. Although you might like chicken legs.
It ain't gonna come that easy.
No, the chicken's not just gonna surrender, right? This is my point, right? So now, remember, but in a fabrication, you can actually alter the nature of things by separating it from its lineal nature. Like you separate the parents from the children. You take black children and raise them in a Spanish-speaking environment. They speak Spanish. They don't speak English. You take black children and raise them in a white environment. They don't identify with black people. They do that other thing, the American thing, okay? And while destroying your ethnic group might have worked for the people in charge because they had an agenda, they systematically excluded our people by appearance. The Donald Trump, right? He threw his son under the bus by saying his son was a nice guy. He admired his honesty, or his what did he say?
Transparency.
His transparency, right? That's throwing that boy under the bus. You admire that your son gave up the evidence against himself, but they said you didn't have anything to do with it. He didn't know anything about it. They made sure they said Donald Trump didn't know anything about it.
Right. I hear what you're saying.
But they established the timeline. They established the timeline
Yeah.
of how and who was there, and
Right.
the campaign manager, the son-in-law, the son, the first son, all there. right?
I hear what you're
They
saying.
threw him under the bus.
I hear what you're saying. I think that that analysis is so much that you said I want to get to, because I think that it's a very interesting analysis. In terms of, and it's interesting that you said he threw him under the bus, because I think that is one interpretation that we haven't heard. And this is breaking news. It really started this weekend. And it's getting hot. Yeah, he got a lawyer real quick, fast, in a hurry. So I think that what we have to understand is that we have, and it's interesting that you use analogy of an animal that is trying to save its life, right? Because in some ways we have an animal that's trying to save its presidency, right? And I think that we have to recognize that the structure of power in the United States let this get away from them. I actually think in many ways that Donald Trump is not a reflection of, is not a more genuine reflection of the power structure of the United States. I think that in many ways Barack Obama had to happen. And the reason why Barack Obama had to happen is it allows this, and you called it a fabrication. I like that word. I think it allows us to believe in this Horatio Alger myth that you can work hard and you can be whoever you want to be, when in actuality, Barack Obama's presidency has not changed and could not change the fundamental nature that black people, the fundamental relationship that people of African descent have with the United States. So in many ways, while I think that it was important that Barack Obama was the president, we have to also recognize that that certainly does not mean that the fundamental situation that we are addressing has changed. In fact, you also mentioned that these white supremacists have really become inflamed by his election, and we can see that gun sales are at an all-time high. They have exploded since Barack Obama became president. And in fact, they've actually, some of those gun sales have actually declined since Donald Trump was elected, because part of what the most reactionary racist elements, I didn't say the racist elements, I said the most reactionary racist elements wanted to believe is that Barack Obama sought to take their guns, that Barack Obama was going to, through some sort of violent act, remove people's ability to have weapons. And I think that it should be clear that that was never the intent. Barack Obama would not be able to do that. But that's what they wanted to believe. Now, so let's get back to Donald Trump and what's happening here.
Wait.
Yeah.
See, there's a lot to unpack right there. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that they thought that Barack was going to take their guns. I think there's
who's the they?
White. We're talking about white wing propagandists, right? Not right wing, white wing propagandists, right? Because that's where that stuff comes from, right? Remember, you have to have an enemy, okay? And when you're trying to stir people up, we're like the most visible one here. Okay? So now, if we got somebody that looked like us in the White House, and he got swag like us in the White House, right? They don't see the white mother. They see the black father. You understand?
That's the construct they created.
Listen,
That's
all I'm saying is they don't see that. Just like the only thing you have to remember is where we are. And where we are is important when we're dealing with who we are and who they are. Remember, they raped our women and produced little Baracks. And enslaved them too. And then raped them and enslaved them. Their own children. So that's who we're dealing with. We're dealing with the element that we're up against. Uses the average white person. Got them hypnotized into thinking that they're a part of some shit that benefits them. Called whiteness.
That's right.
In America.
That's right.
They think that shit benefits them. They get the damnedest wake up calls when they leave the country.
Well, let's be fair. I think it's fair. I think we should say that whiteness does benefit the white person. But you know what the reality is? It doesn't benefit them as much as they'd like. I think that Dave Chappelle said something very interesting. He said that they were all part of the heist, but they didn't like their cut. I love that line because in many ways, what he's actually saying is that certainly whiteness means something. If and I think you would agree with this. I mean, clearly, if you see the manner in which black men are the absolute target of the violent implements of a power struggle, that police kill and abuse black men with impunity, and black women to a lesser degree, but also to greater than anyone else. If you even look at, but wait, I'm gonna go further here. Even look at, I just saw something that was really interesting last night, where even the numbers of pedestrians, more black folk get killed per capita as pedestrians. It seems that when people see black folk in the crosswalk, they are less concerned about whether they kill someone. And that is not something I had heard before. So I think that we should actually understand that whiteness does mean something. I don't want to make it seem like even those poor, impoverished, working class white folks that are fighting for their race aren't getting something. But the reality is, if they understood how little it got them, then what we would see is the poorer and working class people of African descent, and perhaps even those working class whites, unite to overthrow a system that oppresses us at different levels, of course, overall. And I think that if you want to hear more about how this actually happened and how this dastardly plan was hatched, look at the beginnings of the enslavement of the African in the United States. You'll actually see that some of the first Africans that were kidnapped and brought over here were in a structure that is similar to indentured servitude. It's not the same as chattel slavery, but yeah, so that what ended up happening is that system of chattel slavery was literally created in order to allow the most powerful whites at the top to extract benefits, to extract power from all of the masses of people, including people of European descent, the Tomwhoos, as our Kemetic ancestors called them. And look at Bacon's Rebellion. For those of you who are unfamiliar with this, look at Bacon's Rebellion.
Wait, pause that.
Sure.
Clarify what you mean by no.
Black man.
I know who we are. All right, I'm talking about the structure was deliberately set up by who?
I would say that the structure that we are in today was deliberately set up by the most powerful Tomwho, people of European descent. And in doing that, they created a system of racial stratification. And in creating racial stratification, what they did was they cleaved the larger number of people, the working class white folks, away from class consciousness. So they would be more focused primarily on race consciousness. And in that instance, that meant that they would ally themselves. That's what we're really seeing here. We're seeing that working class white folk actually voted for Donald Trump, when in actuality, and you'll see an article every week in the New York Times and other major newspapers, you will actually see that those same people don't truly benefit from his election. I just looked at a rally that went to Washington, D.C. I think it was called the Trach Mamas, right? These are parents of a few different, maybe a few different ethnicities, but primarily white folks who are going to Washington, D.C. to fight for what the right wing called, or the white wing called, Obamacare. And some of those people on that bus voted for Donald Trump when he was absolutely clear that one of his major platform positions was that he wanted to repeal and replace Obamacare. So that now that they are actually attempting to do that, those people who voted for him are actually fighting for a policy that they should be clear Donald Trump was against. And the reason why they did that is because they were voting their race identity rather than their class identity. It's the same reason why we see that the majority of white women voted for Donald Trump, even though he said the vilest things about women, and particularly white women. They still voted, the majority of white women still voted for him. It's the reason why people in those red states, and not just the red states, but in the red states are fighting against their own interests. When they do surveys, they'll tell you that so many of them didn't even know that the Affordable Care Act was actually the same thing as Obamacare. So when you do when they did the surveys, the Affordable Care Act had very high marks, but Obamacare had very low marks because they attached it to the black person in the White House. And that's the problem. Now, I honestly say some people who are more naive would say it's so simple. Then what people of African descent should do is we should no longer be arguing that we have race interest, and that what we should do is we should discard race and love everybody so that we can convince these poor whites that we are on the same team. I think that that's ludicrous. It's ridiculous. It's a kind of strategy that was not hatched by anyone who has been familiar with the last 200 years at least of history. The reality is that we do have race interests, that we are poorer because of our enslavement, that we are poorer because Europeans took the resources of our homeland, including, in some instances, the most eligible participants in the workforce of those nations. So all of that still beckons to the reality of race in the United States, and in fact, in many instances around the world. We do have to still address race. And for those whites, those Tomhu, that understand that this structure doesn't benefit them, what they should be doing is they should be, and this is something that my queen and I always say, they should be working in their community. They should be working to develop class consciousness in many ways in their own community. So they recognize that yes, they are part of the heist, and yes, they do have a share. But the share for powerful whites is so much larger than their share that they should be fighting in a different manner. This harkens back to what Howard Dean said when he was running for president. He said that those white folks with the Confederate flag on their pickup trucks should be voting Democratic. He got lambasted for that comment, and he deserved to be lambasted. But I understand what he was trying to say was those working class whites should come into consciousness that their interests do not lie in the Republican Party. I would argue that their interests also don't lie firmly in the Democratic Party, but at least the Democratic Party is closer to their interests than the Republican Party.